Build high for happiness. Paradise Towers! Classic Doctor Who time, 7th Doctor story this time. And this is one from his first season prior to Ace showing up, which means that it's not particularly well regarded. The general sense I get from people of this one is that it is too silly, too ridiculous, and it's just not that great. For the most part, I'm going to disagree. I actually rather liked this one up to a point. There's some issues on the tail end. I'll explain them when I get there. Basic premise, this massive apartment building called Paradise Towers. That is where the Doctor and Mel land, initially just looking for the swimming pool because the TARDIS is temporarily without one. It had one. The Doctor ejected it from the TARDIS because it was leaking. So they're there just for the pool on the roof, really. But this massive hundreds of stories, multiple hundreds of stories, tower block that it's kind of its own internal dystopia. You have the younger people who have formed their little gangs, and there is graffiti everywhere. There is low-key gang warfare going on. You have the caretakers who are the cops, and they don't really seem to care that much about the safety of the people. You have the older folks who end up being dangerous for other reasons. In some ways, honestly, it reminded me a bit of the Mega Blocks, like from Dread. If you saw the version of Dread with Carl Urban, it reminded me of that a little bit, which that's just a fun kind of setting for me. And I think there is just some fun and entertaining dynamics going on with pretty much everybody involved, Mel included. Mel tends to get the short shaft a lot, I think, in a lot of fan assessments, largely because she has a tendency to be leaned on to scream and not always do a heck of a lot else. She gets a bit to do here. She gets some interesting interactions with other characters, more than a few of them. And the Doctor bouncing around trying to figure everything out is delightful. Even at this early point, another thing that I know is sort of the popular perception of Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor, and I think I've even repeated this at some point because it was just kind of the accepted wisdom, is that he was very silly. He was almost clownish in his first season. They brought in the darker elements later. Like, actually, there's some hints of that here. The manipulation, the willingness to just twist the way people are thinking and just twist words and just be really, really sneaky. Not even necessarily clever, but sneaky. And that's not to say that he isn't clever, but like there's an emphasis on duplicity with him in a way that didn't really feel like it was the case very often with the other Doctors. So I'd say the early hints about the more Machiavellian sides of Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, there's hints of them here already, even in this season. So anyone who tells you that it was largely introduced later on, no, it was introduced early enough. It got explored deeper later on. I'll give you that. But this is, for the most part, a kind of setup that, as long as you're willing to not take it too seriously, because, like, honestly, like, I don't know if this comparison is going to make sense. It feels general energy to it. Kind of feels like the Happiness Patrol without the political commentary. That might sound kind of damning. The political commentary is a very big part of why Happiness Patrol is freaking great. But it doesn't have as much on its mind. It has slight evocations of some political stuff. There's a little bit about the backstory of how things got into the situation, which has some political implications. There's the chief deputy of the caretakers who, between the suit and the mustache they've got on him, a little bit of a fascist image going on. So like there are small things like that, but there doesn't seem to be as much specific message intent that there is in Happiness Patrol, which pulls off what it's doing very, very well. But this does have that sort of general feel of like kind of run down, but also some more colorful aspects to it. And it's a nice mix of elements. And I do enjoy it. With the various gangs, you have what are called the Kangs, and it's all women gangs, and there is a story reason given for that. There's an interesting character called Pex, and Pex is just absurd. Like he's like, I'm strong and I'm here and I will help and I'm heroic, but he's also just like unhelpful and kind of dumb. Like his I adore his introduction so much. So Mel is in this apartment talking to these two old women. I'll get to the old women. Don't worry, I didn't forget. And suddenly this guy just busts down the door, points a gun at the old women, and says to Mel, "Are these old women annoying you?" She goes, "No." Then he points the gun at her and goes, "Are you annoying them?" It's just like, I must come in and be the hero and take charge of things. I'm not needed. I'll figure out something to do. Like he's so ridiculous. But there's also, as you get to know him a bit more and find out more about him, there is some depth and some even melancholy to him. But he's also just ridiculous and funny. And I did rather enjoy him. Okay, so let's talk about the elderly lesbian cannibals. All right. And don't tell me they're not lesbians. No. I do not believe you if you try and tell me that these two old women with their cheery demeanor and their homey atmosphere talking about cooking up Mel are not in a lifelong, very committed relationship. I don't believe you. I think you need to wake up and see what is directly in front of you. They are in a beautiful, lifelong relationship. They just also happen to eat people. But I called where that was going from their introduction very, very early. That it's like, oh, it's going to turn out they're cannibals and they want to eat Mel. But the show doesn't try and string that along as a twist, although it takes Mel a fair bit of time to figure that out. But it is, again, just fun. And it's the kind of absurdity I like in this setup. These three different all-girl gangs, the yellow Kangs, the red Kangs, the blue Kangs, who are all basically the same, but are at war with each other, but also are very careful not to be overly violent against each other. And it is their rule not to unalive each other. That's the actual terminology that they use in it. And they've got all their graffiti on the walls, which the caretakers call wall scrawl. So like there's, and just the way the Kangs talk, it's a little bit of invented slang and a little bit broken English. It feels almost kind of like a poor man's version of the slang from Clockwork Orange, which again just feels like a nice, fun touch. I think this is quite entertaining. Where it falls apart is when the villain kicks in. So this is going to get into some spoilers because the villain is a twist, but also like it's not a surprising twist if you are paying attention at all. Who it turns out to be is going to be very obvious, but what they do is it's not threatening. So there is a character whose name I cannot remember now, but he is the great architect who built Paradise Towers, and he is referred to by name repeatedly. And so eventually, when it turns out there's some sort of mind in the basement that is controlling the cleaners. Oh, okay. The cleaning robots are adorably janky. Like the way they move, it's just so stiff and slow, and they go to choke people and the actors have to stand there and very clearly not try and get away from it because these things couldn't grab worth a dang. Like it's adorable. I like it. And these things rolling down the hallways with just legs sticking out the trash bins and their backsides. Like it's funny. I kind of love these things. But like the thing that's controlling these is this big, I don't even know what it's supposed to be, but it looks like a big overdone furnace. And it has the mind of the great architect in it. And his big plan is to take over a human form. So he takes over the chief deputy. So here's the first problem. While I can understand a reason why this guy doesn't like being stuck in some big mechanical whatever that his brain's kind of stuck in. He's more threatening that way. Because now he's just a dude. And more to the point, just a dude who either made an acting choice that doesn't work or was given direction that doesn't work. I'm not going to say the actor's bad, because the actor who plays the chief deputy, up until the point where he gets possessed for the climax, I actually like him a lot. He has delivery on some of his lines that I think is fantastic, whether it's when he's face to face with the doctor and like, because he initially mistakes the doctor for the great architect. Like, he has returned, all hail the great architect, and all his subordinates around him, all hail. And then he gets up in his face and goes, now kill him. The delivery is great. And he has some other lines later on which are a little bit weird and wonky, but like in a fun way, where he's talking to this the whatever machine the great architect is possessing, and he keeps referring to like, well, tell me what it is you're doing. Tell daddy what's going on. It's like, okay, that's weird, but it's weird in a way that works. But then the way he plays it after he's possessed is he's very drunk. Is kind of how it feels like. His lines are slurred and he moves very stiff, like he's afraid he'll fall over. And I can understand why that choice would be made, because like if this mind hasn't been used to controlling a body in a long time, that it would be stiff and it would be awkward. I get that, but that doesn't fix the fact that this is deeply unthreatening. This thing went from admittedly a fairly campy, massive booming voice, I must feed, in this machine with these massive glowing red eyes, to this guy in silver face paint who seems like he maybe should have gone home before I had those last 3 drinks. And he's not threatening. Like, he's deeply unthreatening. The resolution to it, like, functions well enough, does okay, but the diminishment of what was already kind of a, at best, somewhat campy threat really kind of does take the legs out from under it, because it doesn't feel like a that's campy fun choice. It feels like that just doesn't work. Because, and again, I can go either way on Doctor Who camp. Sometimes I'm less forgiving of it. Sometimes, and I think a lot of it just comes down to atmosphere. You get the atmosphere right, I can be pretty accepting of a certain degree of camp. And I do think a lot of Sylvester McCoy's era gets it right, and I do think most of this story gets it right. It's just that last bit. Because, like, do you have an idea of what I mean by, like, adorably janky or campy? Eventually, Mel does get up to the pool and gets in and gets attacked by these yellow robot crab things. The pool is repeatedly shown it is incredibly clear water. You can see through all of it. How did this thing sneak up on her underwater? Because, like, they try and crop the shot, so, like, oh, here it comes on. Like, how did she not see that? How did she not see that thing lurking in the pool the instant she peered into it? Regardless of whether it was anywhere near her or not, there's no way you could miss this thing in water that clear. But that's kind of adorable, because ultimately, like, these things don't matter. Maybe that's the difference. These robot crabs don't matter. So, like, the fact that they're a janky mess, like, whatever. The main villain kind of matters, or at least he should. And yeah, it's a shame. But other than, like, falling apart a bit at the end, I still had a good time with this. Like, it's a bit wobbly, and I do think later McCoy stories are definitely stronger than this. Again, I would say that Happiness Patrol is the absolute definite improved upgrade of this, with extra spicy political commentary to boot. But this, I think, because this was not the last season, this shows a lot of promise in the character and the show as a whole that gets delivered on in later seasons. But it's also not completely wasted here. It's just janky fun. That's it. Happiness Patrol's the go on Paradise Towers. Ha ha! I thought you had me there. I did that to myself. Never mind. Have you seen this one? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, and subscribe. They all help me out. but don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. Time for me to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B, Turok, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Ruth, Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris. That was a new one, that's why I paused. Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabi Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, Twisted Wishes, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pau Barabajoggle, and Marigi. if you want to support me as well and help keep these little buggers fed, check out my Patreon. Thanks so much.